Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Understanding LGBT on this platform, which Practo has provided us. Thank you for sharing your time on a Friday evening. My name is Dr. Prasad Dandekar. I'm an oncologist based in the city of Mumbai. And you might wonder what an oncologist is doing talking about LGBT. Uh, I am gay myself, and I'm going to share my understanding and my lived experiences through today's panel discussion. And what a star-studded panel we have. We have Apurva Asrani, who actually doesn't need any introduction. Apurva is a national award winner, a Filmfare Award winner, and a Screen Award winner, very famous personality, very famous on social media. You might remember the amazing work that he has done right from Satya, which was such a path-breaking film, to Aligarh, which really changed the perception of LGBT community in our country, even at the time when homosexuality was a crime. And now from OTT platform, he has made some beautiful stuff such as Made in Heaven. So welcome, Apurva, and thank you for sparing your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The next panelist we have is Dr. Ajay Nair. Ajay Nair is a very well accomplished, not only a doctor, but he's also a public health expert. And although, as I said, we are on platform of Practo today, but Ajay was the one who pioneered digital healthcare in India as far behind as in 2009 when he started Mera Doctor, which was the largest online platform at that time, which sort of opened the doors for telemedicine in India. So very pioneering stuff. He has done really interesting work until now, and now he is the CEO of Swasth Alliance. And Swasth Alliance is an interesting organization which is basically a conglomerate of many healthcare organizations coming together with the aim of bringing quality healthcare to safety of our health. So welcome, Ajay. Thank you for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Prasad. Thank you.
So our aim today, Apurva and Ajay, is to talk about the LGBT community, and we want to explain people what is LGBT community and what are the challenges that people go through. So we have Apurva as a member of the LGBT community joining us, and Ajay is joining as an amazing ally to us. So before we dive in, let me just talk a little bit about what is LGBT, because many of us are still struggling with this, terminologies. So L stands for lesbian, where a woman is physically, sexually, and emotionally attracted to another woman. B is a bisexual individual. It could be a man or a woman who are attracted to both men and women. And that attraction doesn't have to be 50-50. Um, then we have G. G is gay. Gay is basically men who are attracted to other men. It's also loosely used a term for the LGBT community also. And the third is transgender. Transgender is somebody who's born of a particular sex. So, for example, if a child is born male, but the child as they grow up identify as a female, then that individual would be called transgender, where they would be called as trans woman. Or it could be the other way around, where the child is born as a female child, and as they grow up, they identify as a man, and they would be called as trans man. We will go into details as we go along the discussion. So let's dive in right away, and I want to ask Apurva. Apurva, understanding LGBT community is sometimes quite difficult for people like you and me who are from the LGBT community. So, what has been your experience so far from other people, about understanding where you come from?
Uh, We ourselves, like you just mentioned, are trying to understand uh, our own identity in terms of how it fits within the community and all of that. Uh, we're actually, if I can call it, legal status is not even 3 years old. So this integration into society, into the mainstream, has actually only really just begun. Um, but I never felt while growing up that I was that different from other people. You know, It's when people reacted in a particular way when they saw me with a boy or caught me with a boy or any of those things, that the idea of this being not what they would call normal, and the idea of shame and stuff was planted. But over the time where we are right now, I mean, we live in a society where there are several LGBTQ members who are, people like yourself, whose identity is not your sexuality. You're a extremely well-known and successful doctor and oncologist. And, I have been known as a film editor and subsequently a screenwriter for several years. Head of VIP Industries, is a woman who also identifies as a lesbian. So this is the world we live in today. Um, so I think people's perceptions also have changed over time, as we have been, maybe creating media and content that is far more respectful. It's giving people a different idea, because earlier on, if you saw a gay character, it was just for either comic purposes or for villainous purposes. I mean, that was the whole idea. If you could make fun of gay people and whatever, that this is what they were there for. But over time, the kind of content that's come up, I'm sure we'll discuss at some point later on. I think the perception is changing among people. A conversation that was not happening in living rooms with families over dinner tables is today it's happening. Arey, wo kya, wo gay hai kya? Wo kya hota hai? And the son is explaining, and this is happening. I never saw that growing up. So yes, we're in that a very nice place where things are actually transitioning. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. We definitely live in changing times and changing for good. So, Ajay, you have been a healthcare professional and an entrepreneur to start with, and you have worked very closely with the LGBT community. What has been your experience from the healthcare point of view? That what do you think are the challenges that the LGBT community as such has been facing?
Thank you, Prasad, and thanks for having me. So, I think that this is true of marginalized communities across India, the LGBTQ community, caste communities. One of the key issues, so there is a tremendous amount of stigma, and like Apurva said, I agree the times are changing and things are getting better. But I worked in public hospitals in Bombay, and I remember how trans people would be treated when they came in into the emergency room or came in, and so our systems weren't very kind, right? I think there is the legal change that has happened over the last few years, but I think there is also a mindset change that needs to happen. And the health system is not kind to the average Indian. So when you're additionally marginalized, then it becomes a lot harder to access. So to me, that was one key thing that I remember. And then, in my work with Hamsafar after that, what I also saw was that, what this lack of access does. It leads to dangerous behavior. It leads to a lot of health conditions being ignored uh, because of the stigma, because of the barriers to access. And I would actually put that as very high up. So one is that. The second is, even for healthcare providers to have a sense of what the issues that people face are is very important. And that sensitization almost never happened, right? Because if you remember when you and I were studying, all we learned about the LGBT community was in a forensic medicine book, where we learned about the article in the Indian Penal Code talking about natural sex, which is pretty much all that was taught to us as doctors studying. So I think it becomes very important to understand context. It becomes very important to understand that if you have somebody who's marginalized and has a lack of access to multiple services, including health services, one needs to go the extra mile to actually include them and make them feel at home, especially when they come into a healthcare setting, which I think that understanding is completely missing, right? And I think that might be building over time, but that was one thing that I'd like to point out.
Yeah, absolutely, Ajay. We never were taught about LGBT community, and you would be sad to hear that even today, the forensic medicine book says that homosexuality is unnatural, even today. So, And there are efforts being taken. For example, I run an initiative called Health Professional for Queer Indians, where we try to sensitize healthcare professionals for the healthcare needs of the LGBT community. And the younger generation, the younger medical students, are really very receptive, and it's heartwarming to see, like this week I'm doing 3 events, two done, one on Sunday. So it's really nice to see that times are changing. But as you said, there are a lot of challenges that the community is still facing. And uh, the while we talk about LGBT as a community, each of those component has very different challenges. We unfortunately do not have any representation on this panel from the lesbians or transgender individuals. But let me tell you, both these components, both these identities get a lot of trouble. Transgenders, because they're visible, that if you're from a trans community or from a Hijra community, uh, people will discriminate you just because the way you look. I was in a panel earlier this afternoon where one of the participants was telling us that they work on finding jobs for trans individuals, and one of the candidate was actually scheduled for an interview, but that candidate could not appear for that interview because the security guard at the office gate just wouldn't allow them to come inside. They were driven away. So, trans community faces a lot of discrimination because they're visible, while the lesbian community has a completely different issue, I suppose, is that they are invisibilized. In India, we don't talk about sex. We don't talk about sexual desires. Talking about women's sexuality is at a completely different level, and unfortunately, that is not happening. So their challenges are again quite a lot. So I want to come back to you, Apurva. What challenges do you see around you? I mean, let's face it that people such as you and me come from a privileged backgrounds, but we do see a lot of problems around us. And do you have any experience of what are the challenges that the community members have faced and even are facing today?
I mean, we're all facing similar challenges at different levels. Like you're absolutely right. We come from a place of more privilege, but also people that come from privilege are often very. Our education system is so Western in many ways that this whole ideas of morality, they've come into our family lives as well, where they're very Victorian values that tell you that this is actually wrong. And so, even though my parents, who are well educated and well traveled people, way back in 98 when I came out to them, it was one of the worst shocks that they could have ever have gone through. It was almost like losing a parent to cancer, like what my mother had, and she had actually mentioned that. Uh, there's so much guilt that's associated with your own just being who you are, you know. So a lot of LGBTQ people grow up pretending, putting on a mask, and when you put on a mask, when you pretend, when you're not your authentic self, in order to make your parents happy and family, because as Indian people, we're very family oriented, and we do care a lot about our parents. You tend to suffocate yourself, suffocate your own desires. Very often, you will find a lot of gay people. I know a lot of gay people who got married to women, heterosexual women who didn't have any idea about their sexuality. And what happens to that marriage? What happens to their families? In just kind of preserving this lie for as long as one can. Uh, I think, and that's happening all across the board. It's happening in the hinterland. It's happening in the interiors. It's happening in the cities. It's happening with people who come from business families. You know, um, so we need to actually come to a place where we can talk about this. Um, we are not able to talk about it, and because we're not able to talk about it, we are not able to share with people how we grew up. We grew up very differently. We didn't grow up in an environment where we could, number one, be ourselves, that we could create healthy relationships with people that we were attracted to. A boy and girl, just think about it, it's so normal and so natural for you to just say that, oh, I like that girl, and you can talk about it, and you can ask her out on a date, and you can do all those things. But for uh, gay boys and other LGBTQ people, we had to suppress those desires. So what kind of social skills did we develop? When people, the straight boys are talking in very masculine terms about, sport and girls and all of that, and you're not feeling like that, but you feel like you need to contribute. How do you come across? So there has been a lot of psychological damage that this has caused. So and that acts out in different ways. Like I mentioned, people marrying, a lot of gay men end up being very lonely for their entire lives, because they can't find a fulfilling relationship. Me and my ex-partner, and I wanted to buy a home together and stuff like that. And even though we were ready, and it was principally a home that we bought, together, but the paperwork, the bank loans, they don't recognize any of this, right? So there are a lot of pitfalls, and we need to start talking more about it so that there can be some attention given to it.
Yeah, indeed. The problems that we face are at multiple level, whether it is legal, whether it is societal, emotional challenges are again a huge problem. So Ajay, coming to you, what has been your experience as an ally growing up? What difference do you think does it make to people from the LGBT community to have an ally as they grow up versus not have an ally?
I think, it took me a while to understand a lot of this. I don't think I had a very clear sense of what this community looks like when I was younger. In fact, through school, um, it took me some time, right? I think it was medical school and beyond. Um, and to me, I think the one crucial task of an ally is to listen, right? Like I think that, and what Apurva said, there are conversations that society has deemed normal and conversations that society has deemed abnormal. And it's frankly not that different from being a good friend. Once you look at this and take away the filters that you have, it's really just being a good friend and being a voice of reason, a compassionate voice. It's also allowing and making sure that you speak up where needed, right? So you have, and then random things happen, right? So like people get teased in school. There is some level of victimization that happens, and being in a position of privilege, you are able to speak up. And I think those would be the two things that I would sort of call out, right? One is just being honestly just being a good person, a good friend, and giving people the space to actually converse. And the second is speaking up when needed, and speaking up in situations where only you can, as opposed to, I'm not saying that allies need to go out and be spokespeople for the LGBT community. That you should let the community do. But I think there are social situations where an ally should speak up, especially when somebody is being targeted in some way. And that's where I think those are two things that I think that I came to realize, and frankly, much later in life, right? Like it didn't come in school. Like I don't think any of these conversations happened in the school playground.
I was bullied in the school to a certain extent, but I had an amazing experience growing up in the sense when I was in my 12th standard, I had a very close friend of mine. We were together in 11th and 12th. And by the time I was sort of grappling with my own sexuality, but I realized that I'm different. And I couldn't really tell him. I was finding it very difficult how to tell him. But finally, I felt that I'm betraying our friendship by not being open with him. So I told him, and both of us must have been hardly 16 at that point. So I sat him down and I said, you know what, I need to tell you something. I'm gay. So there was a pause for a few seconds and he said, okay. So I said, what do you mean, okay? Do you understand what I'm saying? So he said, yes, I understand what you're saying. So I said, then why are you saying okay? So he said, what else do you want me to say? It's okay. How does it matter if you're gay? And that unconditional acceptance for who I am at the age of 16, when I myself was not very sure about what's happening with me, I think it changed my life. I am who I am because of that unconditional acceptance. Because had it not been there, or had he reacted negatively, it would have probably had a much deeper impact on my self belief, my self respect, and who I am as a person. So I'm eternally thankful to that friend who showed me that unconditional acceptance. And as Ajay, you said that that's an ally should do. Just be a good friend and listen. So, Apurva, have you had any experience of, when you came out of some stories around that?
Um, when you're growing up and you're in school and college and like any other teenager, and you have crushes on people, you know. So I do remember I had this crush on this one guy in junior college. And we were all pretending to be straight at that point in time. Everyone had girlfriends, and that was I mean, we were more than pretending. I think we were all figuring it out. So I don't think he saw it. He understood what I was feeling, and we would hang out a lot. We would be part of the same kind of dramatic societies and things like that. And we became very thick and very like synonymous with each other. You know, okay, these two will be in the cafeteria. These two are going to be there. These two are, and discussing things and all whatever. So one day, I we had a sleepover at my house, and I think must have, you know, I mean, not really physically, but yeah, there must have been some level of physical touch, which I even that he didn't react to too strongly. And then I told him, I said, I think I really like you, and he said, of course I like you too. I said, no, 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 you don't understand. I think I really, like I think I love you or something like that. So he was in my house, so he couldn't really react very strongly. But I do remember that he turned around and slept. He stopped talking to me in college. He stopped hanging out with me. In fact, he became really embarrassed that um, we had been seen together so much in the past. Okay, what does that make me? And that still happens, Prasad, with me in my film industry, which is probably one of the gayest places in the world. But there are only maybe two out people, Ornir and myself, and a few others. You see, so here also some of these filmmakers, who will kind of wear their sexuality on their sleeve but never talk about it. So they are very afraid to associate. So this with this guy also, from the next day onwards, I was slowly like elbowed out of that group, talk to people. And then one day in the toilet there was some sketch, very unsavory sketch with my name and stuff. And so what that did to me was it made me my whole heterosexual pretense became even stronger in my college days. My relationships with girls, and peer pressure forces you to do that. Now, having said that, I mean, I also had some incredible friends who, just like your friend, who turned around to me and said, what difference does it make? You know, we love you for who you are, and that's why we're where we are today.
You brought in an interesting point about wearing your sexuality on sleeve and not really talking about it. And, um, I sometimes see it with some members of the LGBT community that they are, sometimes I feel, are obsessed with their sexuality. And I personally feel that my homosexuality is a part of me. I'm not a gay man. I'm Prasad. I happen to be gay. I happen to be a husband. I happen to be a doctor. I happen to be an uncle to my two nieces. And there is so many roles that I play. And my sexuality is just one aspect of that. So I do know a lot of people who don't want to talk about their sexuality, and that's perfectly fine because it's completely private, it's personal. Like, for example, a heterosexual individual does not have to come out of closet, right? Your heterosexual friends don't have to declare that, oh, I'm heterosexual, I like girls, and I'm going to marry a woman. So why should we? So yeah, it's everybody, as you rightly said, Apurva, has their own ways of dealing with it.
I want to sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to add to this thing that you're saying. It just is one point about a lot of gay people who do wear their sexuality on their sleeve, and who come out and declare. I think it's extremely important. This is my personal opinion. In at the times we live in today, for a lot of people to come out and declare, because you see, the when the 2013 Supreme Court judgment happened, the thing that they said that really irked me and many like me was that they called us a minuscule minority, almost like a minuscule minority doesn't really deserve any rights at all, right? And it became very important, and I hadn't publicly come out before that, for the same reason, because I know how people stereotype you the moment they know of your sexuality. So I actually built my career, did my work and everything without having to publicly come out of the closet. uh, but after the 2013 judgment, I became acutely aware of the fact that we needed to show them that we are not a minuscule minority. And I began to understand a lot of my friends who had bravely worn their sexuality on their sleeve, just to basically let the world know, let society know that we exist. And you see, when you're almost fighting against a force that's telling you, don't be visible, you know, don't be. People cite examples of filmmakers who are obviously gay but they're not out, and say, look, this one doesn't need to come out, why do you need to come out and stuff. And I realized that all the people who were fighting this and coming out, whether they're wearing pink feather boas or flags or makeup or whatever it is that they were wearing, it took so much courage to stand out there and to say we are here, to stand in that parade and to say we are here. So while I do respect people who cannot come out of the closet and would like to keep it private, I really do encourage people to be more visible if they can, like what Ajay said about if you have the privilege and if you have the, then you use it. Like, to that kind of to that extent, I really do believe that I encourage people at a time like this, especially, to really come out and to be counted.
And the only way I feel that people can come out is if they feel safe. And for them to feel safe, whether it is a lesbian, whether it is a gay man, whether it is a bisexual individual or a transgender individual or a genderqueer individual, we need to build a structure of allies. So, allies are people who are respectful of the LGBT community and they would support the community. And I want to ask Ajay that you have been an amazing ally to the community. What was your experience when you first time encountered somebody from the LGBT community? And what are your thoughts on how can we build a network of allies in our society?
So hard to think back and think about what my reaction was. I don't think I had any reaction. I think the one thing that I remember is that I was at Hamsafar, where pretty much everybody was gay, and I was the only straight person. And that was an interesting experience. Like, so it was role reversal in terms of feeling like a minority, and that was very very interesting to me, right? Like, because it just felt like, okay, this is I'm the different one. Everybody else here is normal. The Going back to what Apurva said, I agree that people should come out, but I also feel like everybody has their own set of circumstances. And there's a very close friend of mine who struggled with his sexuality, came out to himself and to some close friends. He's still not come out to his family. And this is not somebody, and traditionally privileged. He went to the best schools, traveled, very well traveled. And I remember him coming out at the age of 40 to a lot to himself, and then to close friends. And I don't think, and while people had had conversations with him before that saying, oh, you should be out. I respect the fact that, he had his own, and he still has, he comes from a very traditional family. He's really afraid that his mother's going to have a heart attack and die if he comes out to her. And like, and that's honestly, he knows his reality better. So to me, I think we also need, like, there is no right time to come out. There is no, we should, I mean, to me, at least as a friend, with my friends, for me, it is, you let them decide because they understand their reality a lot better. I know I didn't answer your question, Prasad, but that's, and on the second piece on, allies and how to have, I think, to me, I think that is happening, right? It's happening especially in the urban classes that we move in. But I guess the question is that, that is, we are like 1 or 2% of India. Question is, what's happening in the rest of India? And I think that requires a lot more. It's incredible the work that Apurva is doing, Made in Heaven, but there's a lot more of normalization that needs to happen, because I think the top 2-3% of India will hopefully figure it out eventually, but I'm concerned about the rest of the country. And the other thing I want to bring about is that, when we talk about allyship and we talk about allies, I think we have to understand that there's lots of marginalized communities in India. So there's the LGBTQ communities that we're talking about, but there's also caste communities, tribal communities, and there's different kinds of privilege, and there's different kinds of discrimination that this country sees. And I just think that, while I see myself as an ally to the LGBT community, I also see myself as an ally to those communities, and I think that should be true for all of us.
Yeah, building a true culture of diversity. And if you look at India, India is such a beautiful, beautiful example of what diversity is. You just look at North India versus South India, West of India, East of India, every caste, every religion, every language, there's so much diversity. But all that comes together in making this amazing, wonderful country. And I think that needs to probably, we need to be aware how diverse we are and how beautifully we work together. And that probably needs to creep into our day to day experiences where we need to be aware of the differences. And different doesn't mean inferior or superior, different just means different. So we need to sort of become cognizant of that idea. And Ajay, you mentioned about the other part of the country, and I totally agree with you that we are having this conversation on YouTube in English, and it will reach primarily the top, whatever percentage in India. But what do we do for the bottom percentage? I think people like Apurva are already contributing to a large extent. Apurva, do you want to talk about the role that media plays in changing the perception of the society about marginalized communities, including LGBT community?
Sure, Prasad. So, firstly, I do believe that, you know, I don't want to be apologetic for my privilege. If I were not using my privilege and, not bringing awareness to a community that I know and I understand, I know the pitfalls, I know the problems, I feel it, I see it. So, what people like myself are trying to do is through our work, to bring a certain kind of awareness. Made in Heaven, a show that I edited, might be talking to, you know, people from the urban strata of society. But Aligarh is set in Aligarh Muslim University, where there is a Marathi professor, who's discriminated against for his sexuality, um, because he was in love or seeing a male rickshaw puller who happened to be a Muslim. So there's a lot of complexities in this web. Um, it's a film that um, was was not just Professor Siras's story. It was also my story. It was the story of several gay Indians, and which is probably why it connected like that. Then there was this very, very nice documentary called Outcast, which chronicled a lot of people that Ajay would know from Humsafar, who were also part of it, and it actually chronicled the whole journey, the LGBTQ journey that has been made from Nas and Humsafar and various activists and things like that. So there are a few projects, and everything that I write and I create right now has characters. Uh, the idea today, like, this is a very interesting show, Prasad, which I was telling you about recently. It's a mainstream show with Shushmita Sen in the lead, right? It's called Arya. It's on Disney Hotstar, you know, and there is one character in the show who is the cop, who's hunting down this drug lord, and he's quite ruthless, and he's quite he's a very cunning fellow, shrewd guy. um, and there's nothing about him that's soft. There's nothing about him that's he's got that almost hyper masculine kind of a tone. But when he's in his police station and it's lunchtime, this one young man walks in with a dabba, and they sit down together to eat, and he puts his food out on the table for him and serves him. And the other cops walking past, they look at them and they kind of have some mischievous smile, and they go and they shut the door. We leave you all alone for some time, kind of a thing. And it's when these two are having a conversation, you realize that they live together, but the cop's mother is coming to visit. So he's telling his friend, okay, you go and stay in a hotel room for a few days. And the guy saying, why should I go? Right? That is the only reference, probably the insinuation to his sexuality, his role to play in the series and the larger story, is that of a shrewd cop, right? So this kind of mainstreaming that is starting to happen, we waited very long for this. We had like one film in '96 called Fire that Deepa Mehta made, right? Which was about two sisters-in-law, Nandita Das and Shabana Azmi, and their romantic, sexual bond, emotional bond that happens. And then we had to wait a really long time till Onir made the lovely My Brother Nikhil, which showed a relationship between two men for the first time. It was, and then we waited again till Aligarh came out in 2016. So Dostana would have been probably 2008, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 8. Fire was 98. Aligarh was 2016. And between you had far more Dostanas and those kind of films, So it became really important for. And then the year Aligarh came out, we also had Kapoor and Sons, made by the same person who made Dostana, Karan Johar, which I thought was a much more respectful film towards the LGBTQ community. Then we had a film called Dear Dad, where Arvind Swamy is coming out to his son on a drive. Uh, you know, uh, we had Margarita with a Straw, about a girl with cerebral palsy who's also discovering her bisexuality, played by Kalki Kokla. So I would say the 2013 judgment, the December judgment, it propelled a lot of artists, thinkers, creative people, producers, everyone to start talking about this. And there was also a lot of anger that was very palpable, that was channeled into this. So even if you're not telling a story of a gay person from the hinterland, right? We do understand that our film and our cinema is aspirational, and people do emulate. So it might be 2 or 3%, but it's a very, very effective and a very influential 2 or 3%, and that must be encouraged for the work that it's doing, especially in OTT and cinema at this point in time.
Yeah, media plays a huge role, especially films in India. I mean, we have South India where the film stars are worshipped. Yesterday, I was doing an event with LGBT awareness event with the medical college in Chennai, and one of the students actually told me about a Tamil film, which of course I cannot remember the name, but she said it really a mainstream film, a very popular actor in it, and she said that completely changed the way I look at homosexuality. And that film is apparently very popular, so that's amazing. But Apurva, for me, the journey of media and LGBT started way back. Zabar Patel in 1970s made a film called Umbartha in Marathi. He was probably 30 years ahead of his time. Smita Patil played the lead role, and the story was about a lesbian relationship. Amazing film, and that actually, when I saw it, it sort of made me realize that uh, it's not that bad. It's not abnormal. Maybe there is something to it. So I was very young at that point, and I think that really changed the way I looked at my own sexuality. So we're getting some questions from the participants, and one of the question is, how do fellow heterosexual colleagues, co-workers treat you? So I'll share my experience, and then maybe Apurva can share, and Ajay can share his experience of what he may have seen in his corporate, in his work experience about the things that the LGBT community members feel. But when I joined my current organization, I think 6.5 years ago, I was not really out to anybody. I was already living with my partner at that time, and the organization was new. So we had lots of doctors joining from literally all across the globe. And as we got to know each other, the first question anybody would ask you is, "What does your wife do?" And I would then sheepishly answer, actually, I'm not married, I don't have a wife. And then there'd be some sort of a, you could look in their eyes that, oh, he's a man in his late 30s, but he's not married. What's wrong with him? Sometimes I would feel that people actually pity me. And at the same time, I was actually having an amazing life. I was really happy. I'm just having an awesome time living with my partner. So finally, I gave up at one point, and one of my colleagues had organized a dinner party, and I asked him, "Can I bring my partner over?" And I took my partner there, and there were around 100 odd people there. And in that one event, I just came out to everyone. There were surprised looks, there were confused looks on some of the faces, but people came around. And I've been really lucky that I don't face any discrimination or any problems. Having said that, it depends on the individual, the organization, and what you're doing. So, if you are planning to come out, you're a member of the LGBT community, you're planning to come out at work, I would suggest for any coming out, be careful about to whom you are coming out to. Are they ready to receive that information? Are you ready to give that information? Suppose if something goes wrong, then do you have a fallback mechanism? So, for example, if you come out to your parents and you fear that they might throw you out, then are you financially independent? Also, keeping some resources ready, like some articles, maybe numbers of the doctors and psychiatrists, if needed, for people whom you are coming out to, if they need to sort of speak to doctors. So these things are important. Apurva, have you faced any problems when you came out in the film industry? What has been your experience from your colleagues?
Well, I've had the the opposite kind of a reaction, because I think creative people are far more open-minded in many ways, than institutions like you have been discussing. Because as a creative mind, you are exploring different themes and subjects and characters and all of that. But it's also something that's uh, would happen with me a lot would be I think people assumed that because I'm gay and I'm out, that I would be very easily available to overtures of many of my closeted kind of colleagues and journalists and things like that. So I would be called for like script narrations to hotel rooms, where somebody's sitting in one towel and with the legs and all that. It would be like very embarrassing kind of thing. And I can see what's happening. So a lot of that, because you're out of the closet, so it's people just assume that that means that you might be interested in them and stuff like that. And then if you reject or if you don't accept it, it affects your chances uh, ahead in the future. But I think more than anything, I feel like people like yourself and me who for whatever reasons are able to bell the cat, so to speak, to kind of turn on and not bell the cat, to kind of acknowledge the elephant in the room. um, I think we are far more empowered. because when you are hiding something and people can see that you have a secret, right, which they can see, uh, they start to use it against you. That's where the bullying comes from. But there's nothing you can do about it, because if you spoke about it, you would be acknowledging your own sexuality, right? So because of the fact that I would, in my room, if I was not publicly out, turn around, and my colleagues knew and people knew, this is my partner and this is the person I'm seeing, and oh, isn't that guy cute? And I've always been very honest about how I felt. So it becomes very difficult for them to misunderstand me. Then they'll just ask me questions, but hota kaise hai? Matlab, kaun kya karta hai? What is this? What is that? So then you get an opportunity uh, to kind of, whatever misgivings, whatever apprehensions, whatever darkness that they have, I mean, confusion they have about it. And I've realized a lot of people's fears come from the fact that they just don't understand. They're not actually, people are not out there to come and get you for your sexuality. It's a lot of it is confusion. A lot of parents are afraid for their children that what is going to happen to my child once I have gone, who's going to look after him. Because the idea is what? The idea is Dostana wala Abhishek Bachchan and this one. Ke tum log, matlab, maja masti. That is the whole thing. There's nothing else, right? So they need to see relationship, love, heartbreak, children, adoption, dogs, aspirations like that. They need to meet a partner who says, okay, not only am I going to look after you, your parents are my parents too. And that's what me and my ex and our relationship was all about, including our families and including that. And how's that going to happen if you don't talk about it? So if you can talk about it, and not those who can't, that's what needs to happen. People need to see us as human beings, as living, breathing human beings with hearts and desires, and like the rest of them. And that's where we all become common, and we're not this ghettoized community that you can imagine what weird stuff goes on in their hocus pocus rooms. you know we're not those people.
So, Ajay, coming to being an ally, and especially I feel from the workplace point of view, you have worked in various institutions, you have ran institutions, and currently you're running a very large organization yourself. What do you think, as a leader, you would like to do, or your advice to people about how they should be more inclusive of the LGBT community at workplace?
I think it's very important to sort of call out inclusion, diversity officially, right? Like, and I think we've in the last organization I ran and this one, we sort of laid it out as part of the standard SOPs, and there's rules around sexual harassment. It was very important to sort of specifically include this. So I think it's all part of the same normalization that we talk about, right? And I think just making it very, very clear, and also modeling behavior as a leader, I think, is very important. If you don't do that, then you're just sort of preaching, but not really doing any of that. That said, I think that in terms of coming out at work, I really would advise people to look at all the things, Prasad, that you spoke about earlier, which is not everybody has the privilege to do that. Not all workplaces, regardless of what the law says, are accepting. So I think that would be an individual decision where people would have to sort of weigh the pros and cons of doing that, because while we are moving towards more and more legal acceptance, I mean, we still don't have same-sex marriage being legal in India today. Uh, so I still think that people should weigh the pros and cons at their own workplace, and then situations will differ.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to look at the circumstances and take decisions. There is a lot of peer pressure from the LGBT community sometimes to come out, and I sort of don't subscribe to that idea that if you're from the LGBT community, you must be out. You have to be pragmatic. You have to look at where you are coming from and what sort of situation you are in, and then take a call. So we have a few questions coming in about workplace sort of inclusion, and that I think Ajay you have answered quite well. So I wanted to check, Apurva, with you as to what is the way forward. Now we spoke about LGBT community. We spoke about what is LGBT. We spoke that we need to be inclusive. We need to accept people for who you are. But अब करना क्या है? What do we do from here?
Well, what we need to do from here is demand what we need, right? We have to demand. We have to start asking for it. If you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. And I don't think we even realize we've just been designed into the society that's saying, "Okay, be fearful, be afraid, you know, and don't ask for what you want. Not everyone can ask for what you want, and if you don't ask for what you want, you're not going to get it, right? What I want right now is I want to be in a place in my life, and these are my needs. It might not be everybody's needs, as a gay man, is where I can have a relationship with my partner where property, inheritance, and all these things are something that's we have a right to that. We have a right to each other's last funeral rites. These kind of things don't exist. So what does this do to a relationship? you know how does it strengthen it or weaken it to not have any of this? So I think this is one of the things that I feel very strongly about. I want to be in a position to I want to be a father, but adoption laws, they really don't favor single people in this country, especially single men. And then there's also the sex of the child and all of these things. So I think that what we need to now start asking for is to be able to live equally. First of all, recognize it's a very unfair society, right? There is a lot of unfairness here, where just the people on this panel have very different privileges. The law, the country, everything works very differently for, say, an Ajay and for me. you know I can't be married to my partner, and I can't basically jointly buy that property or get that loan, and we can't adopt that child, or we can't do these things. So there is that unfairness that needs to be called out. First, we need to talk about it, and we need to start demanding what we want. And unfortunately, it's only going to happen when there is a strong enough voice, and that is not an individual voice, that's a collective voice. So however long it takes, right? And I don't think we need to pressurize anyone into saying come out and stand and be counted. That has never been the discussion. But what is important is that should be the aspiration. That has to be the aspiration. And aspiration and pressure are completely different things, right? So that is one of the things that I really think is very, very important for us to start demanding what our needs are. And again, sorry to extend this thing, to understand that while we need to be empathetic and understanding of all the different minorities that exist, right? It is impossible for us to have that understanding while we are still struggling and grappling with our own, right? So as a gay man, this is what I want. I don't want to get too lost in or feel that I need to be talking about everyone, because I might not understand the nuances of what is required. And I can't give a blanket कि LGBTQIA सबको ये देना है हमको. That is if you're sitting outside and have your life that's kind of sorted, and you can kind of give it that kind of attention. But I think that's what we need to also do right now after the 2018 judgment. When we're emerging, we need to also look at who we are as lesbians, as transgender people, as gay people, and what exactly is our requirement and our need, right? That is something that needs to start happening.
Yeah, beautifully put, Apurva. So I think we are in a place where we spoke about diversity. So accepting that people are different, that's diversity. Then we spoke about inclusion, that getting people included. So, somebody told me that the diversity and inclusion is like diversity is basically getting an invitation for the party, and inclusion is asking you to dance. But I think we need to move one step forward. we need to move towards equality, that understanding, recognizing our differences, and adjusting for them to provide equal opportunity for everyone. So that I feel is the way forward as we go along. And the younger generation, I think, is doing a great help. I think they are far more open-minded. I've been speaking to a lot of young medical students now, and this sort of awareness that they have and sort of acceptance that they have is really, heartwarming. It's really nice. I think we are coming close to the top of the hour. I want to take the last question for Dr. Ajay. Ajay, you've been running now a large healthcare organization. And one of the issue that the LGBT community faces, as we discussed earlier, is access to healthcare. What do you think we as medical professionals and healthcare providers need to do to change that?
So, I think I just want to build off on what Apurva said earlier. Uh, this equality issue is very, very core to this, right? So, for example, you and your partner, I don't know if you can put him on your health insurance, right? And so there are so access to healthcare comes from multiple angles, and I think at the core of this lies equal rights. And I think that, to me, is the next step to cross. I mean, there's obviously a lot more, and then the other stuff is more about normalizing, a lot of the work that the media is doing and will continue doing. But I think the prerequisite there is just having equal rights, right? If you're not starting out at the same place, then what are we talking about?
Absolutely. So, equal rights and equality for all. And you're right. If I tomorrow fall ill and I'm in ICU, my partner cannot even enter the hospital because he's nobody.
Right.
Forget about he deciding whether I should live or they should pull the plug on me. He cannot even enter the hospital because they'll say, "You are a friend. You can't come in." And that's really sad, and but that's what is changing. And there are, of course, these matters are in court, and we hope that we had the 2018 judgment which decriminalized homosexuality, and we hope that the legal system now takes the next step where it gives us the equal rights uh, for us to live a very fulfilling and life which is equal to everybody. As we come to the end of the session, I want to just summarize what we discussed by saying that I feel we need to identify that we are different. We are different, but we are not superior or inferior. We are just different from each other, and we need to be respectful of that difference. We need to be accepting of that difference. If you are unable to understand that difference, the best thing, as Ajay mentioned, as an ally, you ask. You ask people that, thank you for sharing with me that you are a lesbian woman. I don't understand what you mean. Would you please tell me what it is? So be open minded and ask that question. Every time you discriminate against somebody, you are changing their life for worse, and you're responsible for it. So I urge all of you to be careful with whatever we say, whatever we do, and sometimes what we don't do. As again Ajay mentioned, that as an ally, it is important for you to stand up when somebody is getting bullied. So even if you don't stand up, that also is causing hurt. So let's be inclusive, let's be fair to everyone, and let's take the heritage of our country, which is built on diversity. Our country is one of the most diverse places in the world, and let's build up on that rich heritage that we have, and even all the rich scriptures, religions that we have, who have been so open-minded and diverse. So let's build up on that and be a great ally to the LGBT community. Thank you very much for joining us today. I want to immensely thank Ajay and Apurva for sparing their time for this wonderful discussion, and to Practo for providing this platform for these discussions to happen. We need more and more of such open and heartwarming discussions to happen so that we change the world bit by bit. Thank you very much. Take care. Good night.
Thank you so much.